Hello and welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Vector Continental 6-36x56. This first focal plane high-powered variable optic comes in right around $900. It has a total length of 15.9 inches, weighs 30 ounces, has a field of view rating of 21.6 to 3.6 feet at 100 yards, and an eye relief of 4 inches, as well as a minimum parallax of 15 yards, which is pretty close, and a maximum elevation gain of 31 mils. On a zero can't mount or rail and a pretty pedestrian zero, you could expect about 15 mils of added elevation gain. After already reviewing the 2-12, the 3-18, and now the 6-36, I feel like I've reviewed a lot of the Continental 6x multiplier series. And truth be told, they've all been at least pretty good. The 2-12 is superior to a lot of optics in that price range and in that magnification range. The 3-18 is pretty average to mediocre in most cases. And now there's this. I'm not 100% hopeful that this will be super impressive, because every time that you push a particular type of glass a little bit too far, it starts to show its weak points. And as you might have already been able to tell from this little snippet of video that you're seeing, this has some weak points. But before we exploit all of those, let's do a real quick physical overview. I've done a lot of Vector unboxings, so I'm going to keep this very brief. Inside the box, you get a pretty good assortment of stuff. With the exception of the normal little pamphlets, you do get a set of rings. I haven't reviewed these yet, but they're okay. You get a nice little cleaning cloth as well as a tool to remove your turrets. These come in really handy. Last up are these clear bikini covers. As for the scope itself, it's pretty much in line with what you'd expect from other Continental series scopes. But first off, the weight. They claim 30 ounces, which is pretty lightweight for a 6-36. That's exactly what the scope comes in at. Starting at the back with the fast focus eyepiece, it's pretty tight. The seals do lock up when it's stationary for a while, so you don't have to worry about it accidentally getting jostled free. The magnification ring is a standard 180 degrees, and even though I love the scallop cuts, this thing could really benefit from a throw lever. Inside the illumination compartment, you see a very standard 3-dimple board, and you do get the 11 option brightness setting control on the illumination dial. As far as the side parallax goes, it's very easy to adjust and feels really solid in hand. The elevation turret is locking, and it does have the correct numbering, so this way you can make a correct adjustment going to the left or to the right, and the lockup is very solid. The elevation turret is exactly as you'd expect from all the other Vector Continentals I've reviewed, which is basically fantastic. Physically, this thing is a standard Continental, which is a good thing, because out of the box, these things feel way more premium than their price would suggest. But let's check out the glass. This is the SCFF-70 reticle. This is a very in-depth and involved Christmas tree style reticle, and I have to say it complements this magnification range very well. I'm also a big fan of how Vector decided to illuminate this thing, keeping it to a very simple crosshair. I don't particularly care for when companies illuminate the entire Christmas tree. I think it just gets a little bit too busy. Slowly increasing the magnification to its maximum, you can see we have a fairly fine center crosshair with a very fine center dot inside of that. We do have a 0.2 of a mil gap in between the center crosshair and the rest of the reticle, which isn't going to be for everyone's liking. As far as the illumination here, it looks pretty solid. But one thing you can already tell is that we have shadows creeping in. On my desk, it's not the brightest. I do have a bright light overhead, but it's nowhere near as bright as what actual daylight would represent. And already we could see that in the slightly lighter environment, we have a little bit of shadows creeping in, which is a telltale sign of things to come. Adjusting the illumination shows that you can adjust it fairly deep down and still have it be visible enough to use. Overall, I really like the reticle, I really like the illumination, and I think it jives really well with this magnification range. I really enjoy the sound and feel of these turrets. The zero stop is very assertive, and the rotational indicator works flawlessly. Overall, these turrets are excellent for the money. Given that this is supposed to be a precision optic, I'm going to leave the full tracking section alone so this way you could see how I saw it. See, the reticle doesn't completely line up to the target at 9 mils. It's slightly canted. I got it as best as I could. No impact shift. Changing magnification. Adjusting side parallax. Everything seems to stay in line with one another. We do have some pretty aggressive purple to green fringing. And getting as good as we can get it. There's still a very heavy purple hue. I want to back this out so we can see the entire target, which is roughly 20x. Illumination down here is quite good. And with that, let's do a step test. Four and 4. Elevation looks like it's tracking flawlessly, and we're 1/10 of a mil off on the windage. Windage resets fine. Let's continue up. Up 9 mils, we are about 1/10 off. And at 10 full mils, again, we're about 1/10 off. That would be a tremendously good performance, but unfortunately, when we've reset back to 0, you can see again that the reticle at 9 mils is about 1/10 and a half off. That's 1, that's 2. So it's more or less 2% off on just the reticle scaling to the target. But it does track, at least on center, very good. So, slight discrepancy here, all said and done. This is not the first time that I've reviewed a high-powered variable optic, or rather a medium-powered or even a low-powered, where the reticle might not line up properly to the target, but it does track properly to how the scaling of the reticle appears. I mean, even some high-valued, high-priced, high-powered variable optics performed very similarly to this. So ultimately, it's not a bad result in the slightest. Is it as good as the best? No, the best are literally perfect. But this is still not that far off. If you're really looking for something that's going to be perfect for you, you might have to start looking at a much more expensive option. But even then, some Gen 3 razors, the 6-36s, were off about the same amount. So, flip a coin, unfortunately. Out here in my backyard, it's still pretty bright out, but the illumination blows right through it. The illumination on this thing really is fantastic. And the reticle is very easy to pick up at any magnification, even in very thick brush. Focusing in on our 81-yard eye chart and precision target, you can see the beginning of the end for this optic. Optically, it just falls apart above 25 to 30x. At 36x here, there's a lot of purple hue to it, a lot of grain and fuzz to the image. That's as sharp as we can get it. You can barely make out line number 11. Currently, I have a ZCO 420, a Night Force Attacker 4-16, and the new Gen 3 Razor 4-24. And even at 16x, I can make out line number 10 with ease. Just goes to show you that just because you have more magnification doesn't mean that you're going to have a more betterer performance optically. It's all about the clarity. It's all about the precision of the glass. More doesn't necessarily mean better. And this is the perfect case in point where here at 20x, I think it's easier to read that eye chart than it is at 36. This is what I was talking about earlier. The 2-12 was exceptional. The 3-18 was good, and this, not so much. I do feel that this glass is capable, but when it's done and executed properly. And I think that this scope is just a bridge too far for this glass. Don't believe me? Let's now fast forward a few hours where it's clearly much darker outside, and looking under this heavy canopy at my precision target is going to showcase how poor this thing handles lower light environments. Pushing the camera off to the side, you can see that we can very clearly make out the targets and some of the brush around the tree. Getting back behind the scope and slowly increasing the magnification, it's going to yield some issues. Right off the bat, you could already see that there's some warm hues going on to the image. Illumination is, as it has been, fantastic, but just because you have really good illumination doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to spot your shot well enough to take it. Once again, we'll bring the magnification up to its maximum, and you'll see that above 20x, it really starts to get ugly. That's the best way of really describing it. Adjusting the side parallax gets a little bit better than where it was, but again, it's nowhere near as good as it probably should be. And to showcase how tight the Eyebox is here at 36x, shifting the camera side to side shows just how fast those shadows creep up. And more noticeably than that is how fast the reticle sharpness deteriorates. This is not a very good performance image stability wise, at least at 36x. As we dial it down, it starts to become more and more acceptable, but it really starts getting better around like 20 to 25x. So we're losing a lot of top-end magnification before this thing really gets to the point where I would say it's more than usable. Let's stretch this thing's legs though. Unfortunately, the day that I had the ability to come out here and film was a very hot and muggy day. You can already see that the targets have a little bit of haze going on to them. That's because it was the middle of August when I filmed this, and there was a lot of humidity going on. It was a very nasty, low air quality day, which is not going to do this scope any favors. Out here in the brush, it's the only time where the illumination is not going to be impressive because it's super, super bright out, which is also a bad combination when it comes to chromatic aberration, which this scope has already showcased a lot of. Anyway, we're going to focus on the first solar panel at around 360 yards. I rough set the side parallax to where it should be, and I'm going to increase the magnification to see if that side parallax is going to be accurate enough to where you would actually have to have it for that given distance. It's kind of an important thing. For a lot of scope manufacturers nowadays, they don't even put numbers. They just have a chart going from minimum to maximum, and it's just whatever it is, and I totally get it, because if it's off, what's the point of having numbers if it's going to be completely off? Fortunately for this scope, it's actually very close to being perfect. The image here looks surprisingly good. Very little chromatic aberration, but we can't see those horizontal lines in those individual solar cells. But there's also another thing. We're not at maximum magnification. We're around the 25x mark. Increasing the scope's magnification yields its Achilles heel. Chromatic aberration creeps up, and just the image, again, gets muddy. I tried dialing on the side parallax a little bit. I'm able to save a little bit of the image, and overall it's usable, but it's just not very pleasant. But there's another thing, folks. We're still not at 36x. Now we're at 36x. That little bit extra just showcases just how much this thing struggles at its maximum magnification. If this was a 6 to 30 or 6 to even 26, whatever, it would be vastly improved by a tremendous margin. If this was a 5 to 25, it would probably be outrageously good. But a 6 to 36, it's just too much for this scope, geometry, and glass to handle. It just does not have the ability to do what it needs to do, which is resolute an image. It's that simple. Focusing our attention now at the 1,000-yard solar panel, I once again dial in the side parallax to where it needs to be before we increase the magnification. Like before, I'm going to slowly increase the magnification so you can get a better sense for how this thing's going to perform. This is 20x, and this is where I feel the scope really performs at a very high level. It's about as good as we could expect this image to look. Now, there are a lot of weird shadows coming in from where the sun is positioned, and it's creating and casting this very hard shadow on the face that we're looking at. So that's not doing this thing any favors as well. Above 20x, that's when it really starts to fall apart though. Increasing the magnification by 10x to 30x starts to showcase that even more so. You can see that we have a lot of mirage going on in the air, again, because of how hot and humid and muggy it was. It was a very poor air quality day. Finally bringing it up to its maximum of 36, and well, that's about what we've been seeing so far. The side parallax, though, was basically as close to perfect as possible, which at least that's a benefit. It's at this moment when I realized, hey, maybe if I add 10 mils of elevation, it'll improve the picture quality. So that's exactly what I do. 10 mils added elevation, reacquire our 0, and let's see if we notice any sort of difference. The initial image is darker than what we were looking at normally. A shift to the exit pupil is not uncommon when we start dialing up with elevation like this. So shifting the camera up and down to try to find the perfect spot yields a similar result to what we saw before we added elevation, but I still think this is a little bit less clear than what we saw earlier. Ultimately, not a great performance as well. With all that being said, it's now time to test this thing's image stability and Eyebox. And at 36x, focusing on our 2,000 yard power tower, shifting it doesn't really yield any sort of negative results, with the exception of just showcasing that it has a bit of a tight Eyebox. Earlier, when I shifted it in my backyard, I had the illumination on, and that means that the illumination was causing all that imperfections that we saw with the reticle. As we dial back the magnification, this is going to continue to improve its overall performance, as one would expect and hope, given that the lower you go down in magnification, typically the better it's going to perform. But this is actually a very good performance. It's not great. I'd say it's about average. Given that this thing is a 6-36, the fact that you could still move behind it pretty liberally and still be able to look through it and use it is great to see. Just to make it live for you a little bit more, back in my backyard, illumination on full. Starting at 6x, this is very forgiving at 6x. Think of it like a really good 1 to 6 second focal plane LPVO at 6x. You could really feel free to move around behind it if you had to. Increasing the magnification to about 10x. This is still also quite good. Unfortunately, once we go north of this, things start to fall apart a little bit too quickly, and that's where we've seen all this thing's issues, is right around 25x plus. And you could see it's very hard for me to get the camera right behind this thing, and nearly impossible at 36x. This is just, again, proof positive that's being overworked. Now to put this Continental head-to-head with some very recent acquirements on my behalf. First is going to be with the Arken EP5. This is a 34mm tubed 7-35 by 56 in the first focal plane that comes in less expensive than the Continental. If you do not know what the EP5 is, but you know what the D&T the one is, they're essentially the exact same optic. Lengthwise, they're both a little bit longer than the Continental at 16 inches, but they're significantly heavier at 42 ounces. That's another thing that we really need to take into consideration, is just how lightweight the Continental is, all things considered. As far as our field of view goes, well, the magnifications are slightly different, so that's to be expected that that's going to be different as well. For our eye relief, the Continental comes in at 4 inches, which is very forgiving, and 3.5 for the Arken and the D&T combined. So what do we have between these two? Well, the only thing that's similar between them is the magnification range, 6-36, 7-35. Price-wise, they're also pretty close, but the EP5 and the One are significantly less expensive regularly than the Continental. Even though if you use code CEDAS for Vector, you get $10% rather off your order, but it's still going to be more expensive than either the Arken or the D&T. Both the EP5 and the One feature very similar style reticles and very similar style images. The EP5 here beats the Continental in almost every solid metric looking through it optically. Controls wise, feature set wise, I would say that the Continental beats them out from an exterior standpoint. It feels like a little bit more substantial optic, but is that going to be enough for you? Do you want locking turrets? Continental. Do you want better image? EP5. Reticle, it's going to be completely up to you, but I do prefer the 7.0 reticle in the Continental. I think it's just a little bit better suited for precision shooting, and the illumination is vastly superior to the other two. If all you want is raw performance optically and you don't care about weight or size, go with something like the EP5 or the One. They just beat the Continental. Colors wise, you could see that there's a big difference between these two. The Continental is definitely more warm, whereas the EP5 is a little bit more cool. At 200 yards, I mean, can you see the difference? It's pretty clear. There's almost no chromatic aberration with the EP5. Oh yeah, I should have also mentioned I filmed with these two scopes on the exact same day, so weather conditions, lighting conditions are as close to one another as they're going to possibly get. Just further reinforces how much better the EP5 is as opposed to the Continental. But look at the details on those targets, especially here at 300 yards. You can make out almost all those little 1-inch squares with the EP5, whereas with the Continental, you can't even really see the lines. The resolution, the clarity, the colors, the contrast, everything is better with the EP5. The Continental, unfortunately, just can't keep with it. And it's unfortunately going to be a trend that we're going to continue to see with the rest of the comparisons that I'm about to make. The Bushnell Match Pro ED is a 5 to 30 by 56 millimeter high-powered variable optic. Comes in around $700 to $800. The prices have been fluctuating on these significantly lately. Your mileage may vary. Length, 15.4 inches, weight 32 ounces, so very close to the Continental. Field of view is going to be a little bit different, again, because of the magnification differences. Eye relief is going to be very similar at 3.8 inches for the MPED, 4 inches for the Continental. Both of these will have a 15-yard minimum parallax, and both of them will have 30 mils of elevation gain. But that's really it. The MPED beats the Continental in almost every measurable facet. Now, I just reviewed the 3 to 18 Match Pro ED, and the biggest competitor to that was the Continental 3 to 18, because both of those optics are, as far as I can tell, the exact same. But here's the kicker. Vector also makes a 4 to 24 and a 5 to 30, just like with the MPED with the 3 to 18 versus the Continental 3 to 18. So I wonder, if I had the Continental 5 to 30, would it be very similar to the MPED 5 to 30? I really wonder. Maybe one day I'll find out. But until then, between these two, it's the MPED. The controls are actually very similar to one another, as you would see if you watch my MPED 3 to 18 video. Definitely check that out if you're curious about these styles of scopes. But the MPED still beats the Continental here, again, in every measurable way. Is 6x really that big of a difference up top? Sure. We're looking at two targets that have the exact same size backer. Granted, the target that we're looking at, the shoot and see in the middle, are different, but you can see that there is a noticeable difference size-wise between these two. But still, again, I must ask, is 6x enough of a difference? For me, I don't believe it is, especially when the lower magnification scope has a sharper, cleaner image. Gives you a little bit more ability to use it at the maximum magnification more leniently. And the MPED in this case is, again, the winner. The Continental does have a couple things up its sleeves, but ultimately it can't hold a candle to the MPED. Maybe the Continental 5 to 30 could, but that's going to be a topic for another video. My last comparison for this video is going to be with that of the Meopta O6 5-30 by 56. This is another first focal plane high-powered variable optic. Price point comes in around $1,000. Length is 15.4 inches, weight 36 ounces, so about 6 ounces heavier than the Continental. And yada yada yada, eye reliefs are about the same at 3.9 and 4 inches. Now the view through the Optica is much smaller than the Continental. The other two scopes that we looked at were very similar to the Continental, to maybe slightly larger than what the Continental had to offer. But one point I like to make is pretend you downloaded a picture off the internet and you wanted to print it out. If you print it on a 3-inch by 4-inch piece of paper, it's going to look one way. If you try printing it out on a 2-foot by 3-foot poster, it's going to look another way. So the smaller the view looking through these scopes sometimes might not necessarily mean you're going to be getting a smaller package or less out of it. I think that the smaller the view through most of these scopes, the higher the clarity and the resolution of the picture. And this Optica 6 is proof positive of that, or at least I like to think it is. Just look at how sharp and clean the Optica is compared to the Continental. Both of these targets are roughly at 180 yards. Yeah, the days that I filmed them were completely different, but still, there's no comparison to the sharpness, the clarity, the color of the Optica versus the Continental. And it's only $1,000. It's only a few $100s more. Granted, the biggest thing with the Optica 6 that still prevented me from buying one was the fact that the elevation was locking and zero stop, but the windage was exposed and non-locking. It just bothered me. It was a really silly design choice. However, the Meopro R6s are out, and I do believe that they have fixed that issue that the Opticas had. So if you're interested, definitely check one of those out. But look at the two targets here at 300 yards. It's breathtakingly different. And the reticles are actually very similar, the closest that I've seen so far in these comparisons. Between these two, it would have to be the Meopta. Again, there's no circumstance where I would want to take the Continental over any of the scopes that I've already shown you. And that's not really a good thing. It does not fill me full of confidence or joy. What else can I say, ladies and gentlemen? I'm sure I sounded really, really hard on this optic, and that's because I was expecting a little bit more out of the Continental lineup. Like I said, the 2-12 is exceptional. The 3-18 is good in most cases. Optically, it was at least good. But the 6-36 really is just falls short in a lot of different ways. It's a letdown. It's disappointing. I would love to try my hands on the 4-24 or the 5-30. I'd be a little bit more optimistic that those would perform at least better than this, but I'm still not going to hold my breath because I don't want to die. You know, you expect something to be a certain way, and if it doesn't meet your expectations, you're just let down. So if you don't have any high hopes or any real expectations for anything good, then you'll be surprised if it's good. But if it's not good, then you won't be disappointed. As for me, I was a little bit disappointed with this optic. Not going to lie. Vector sent it in. They wanted me to review it, as they have with all of their optics to me, and they've been very good to me. But just because a company's been good to me doesn't mean that I'm going to give all of their products a perfect, glowing review, unless they deserve it. And this scope, I feel, does not deserve it. And I'm just going to leave it at that. There are a ton of other options out there, like you've already seen. I've made a couple of comparisons for scopes that are very similar to this in very similar price points that I feel are better options for most cases. So with that, I'm going to cut this video. Well, I'm not going to cut it short. It's already 30 minutes long, but I'm going to end it there so it's not any longer, because what's the point of me just repeating myself on and on and on again? To Vector, thank you very much for sending this optic in. I appreciate the option of reviewing it, but I would like to see a little bit more out of this optic in the future. I'd like to see this thing be revamped, because if it could fix its chromatic aberration, its darkness and sharpness issues, this thing could really be something special. Given that it's only 30 ounces in this magnification range, yeah, it would probably excite a lot of people, myself included. But until that time, that's all for now. A huge thank you for all of you for staying tuned, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.